Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I am your host, Attorney Henry Gornbein. As we are aging or have aging parents, sometimes there can be some very difficult conversations and transitions in life. One does not want to give up a comfort zone, whether it's living in your own home, whether it's living alone, or whether it's time to move into perhaps a senior residence or even an assisted living facility. Today on Gracefully Graying, I am pleased to welcome as our guest Alyssa Tobias, who will be discussing some tips for dealing with a stubborn aging parent. Alyssa, welcome to Gracefully Graying.
Thank you for having me, Henry. It's a pleasure to be here.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
I'd be delighted to. So I am a geriatric social worker. I have been in this field for 30 plus years. I graduated from the fabulous University of Michigan School of Social Work in 1995, and I have made this my life's practice and passion. I have worked in every facet in the aging field, independent living, which I'm currently doing right now. I've had my own practice. I've worked in skilled care, hospice care, Alzheimer's. So I've really made it a point to learn a lot about this field so I could be a tool for anyone who needs me.
Alyssa, let me lead off with a question that I have, and that is, how important is timing in dealing with an aging parent who doesn't want to let go, doesn't want to move?
So timing is everything. And in the multiple years I've been doing this, I've never had a situation where I've sat down with someone and they said, I'm so excited to move. So timing, environment is really important when having this conversation, whether it be a parent, an aunt, an uncle, whoever your aging loved one is, who we are dealing with. We want to make sure the mood is appropriate. So when we know someone's agitated, clearly that's not the best time. I always say a nice time is earlier in the morning, because a lot of people who are aging, as we know, memory can be an issue, and people are much more lucid in the morning. So over coffee, when things are calm, and having a game plan ready to go, just to be able to respond in a kind, empathetic way, because it's not going to be an easy conversation, but it's one that has to happen.
Alyssa, how important is it to bring in other family members for these conversations?
So I think it's incredibly important, but that goes along with the timing. So I think the first initial conversation should be kind of a one-on-one, whether it be a kid or a couple children or someone who's involved on a daily basis, and have that conversation probably well before you want to move and say, we just have some concerns and we want you to be a part of it, because it's very important for independence, for your aging loved one to have some say. Even if there's some cognitive impairment, it's really important. So once that initial conversation happens, then you know that you've talked to your family member, you're going to have support from other family members. So 9 out of 10 times, it's not going to go as smoothly as you want it to. So you bring in those reinforcements and in the same kind of loving environment, kind of like a aging intervention, I like to call it, but all out of love. It's all for the purpose of making sure people have their dignity.
Alyssa, tell us some other tips that are so important in dealing with this sensitive.
Knowing how to talk to someone and the verbiage of how we speak to someone is very important. And I think it's most important that when we speak to someone, we're looking directly in their eye and being empathetic. Empathy is incredibly important, because when I speak to someone, I understand that I'm going to be in that situation down the road, and probably not so far, and we are all going to be there. So if we normalize what's going on, because all of us are going to be there. And unfortunately in society, we don't talk about aging. We talk about when we retire, we get to about 70, it's wonderful, but then we don't talk about all the things that happen after. And this is a huge component of how to deal with someone as they age, because every person is going to age differently, and no two people age the same.
What about some other tips?
Oh my goodness. So, ask a lot of questions. We want people to be involved in the process. So when you're talking to your family member and you know there has to be a support, ask them what they would want in an environment. So they're the person who's going to have to make a transition. It's really depending on how their cognition is, where the transition is going to be, if we're moving to independent, assisted, the conversation will be different. So my first recommendation would be to actually just sit down in that calm environment. Like I said, once we have those reinforcements in place, we ask what they want. Do they want to be in a place where it's religiously other people like themselves? Do they want to be in a place where they have companionship, where they want to do activities, the size of their apartment? If that's an independent situation, those are the questions we ask. If we don't have as much cognition, we still want to involve people in that process. So we give one or two choices. Would you like this or would you like that? Because it can be very confusing otherwise. And I think that would get you right on the path. And another thing I'd like to talk about is accept the situation for what it is. Your loved one is not going to want to make this transition. And I can tell you that right off the bat. Every person I've met can live in their condo, their house, their apartment until they're 90 or 95. But what they don't realize, and what we need to communicate to them, is there are safety risks in their apartment, in their home, in their condo. We need to make them accept what's going on. It might not be the reality they want, but we have to explain why this move needs to happen. What are examples of that? When you live in a house or a condo or even apartment, you have stairs. That is a number one safety risk why we need to make a move for people that are starting to age. It takes one fall and then we have a broken hip and then we have a totally different situation altogether. And because of that, we have to be really, really sensitive. And for the kids, the adults who are dealing with it, it's really important that you accept that it's going to be a process and that you're not alone. And there are resources available because you feel very desperate when you're dealing with someone who doesn't want to make a transition in their life, but you know you need to. And I feel like being honest, which I try very hard to have open, honest conversations with every family member of a loved one I meet, because I would want someone to be honest with me. And we sit down and we have that conversation and we say, it's time to make a move. I know you're not happy about it, but we're going to start the talk now so that the transition is much easier. We really want people to be a part of that process. So I hope that gives some insight to that part of the situation. And another thing I would recommend is outline the consequences of what happens if we don't make that move.
It's very important. I mean, there are always consequences. So why don't you tell us how you would outline the consequences of what could happen if they don't make the transition?
And this is what people do not think about, because as we all say in our life, it will never happen to me, right? Well, 9 out of 10 times when someone has a consequence, it's they're falling in their bathroom. It is a fall that makes someone need to move, or they have a medical condition or a cognitive condition. And it's really, really important that we address those things right away, because that is what's going to help us get through this process altogether, and outlining them in a realistic way, saying, this is what's going to happen to you. You fall, then we're going to be in rehab for 6 months. And after rehab, we're going to have to start the process of looking for a place to live, because you're no longer going to be able to deal with steps. I let them know ahead of time what could happen. If you are in failing health, if you have breathing issues, if you have cognitive issues, it's a dignity thing too. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. But it's really, safety is a reason we have to make this move. And I'm certain most people out there are worried sick about their aging loved one being in an apartment, a house, or condo by themselves. We make it about our peace of mind too, because we don't want them to say, we're just so worried about them and they need to move. It would give us some peace of mind knowing that they're taken care of and in a place that they can live out their years independently as they can for their situation. Because again, that is what we want for them when we're talking to them about these issues and why they're so stubborn and why it's so difficult. This generation that's coming up right now, they have not lived in communities. When they think of that, they think about their parents either living at their home, or they think of it as a home or an institution. So there's that stigma that goes along with that as well. So when you have the conversation, in the back of their mind, they're thinking, my kids are putting me somewhere. We want to destigmatize that immediately and let them know we're not putting anyone anywhere. We're making a transition of housing. And we have to be sensitive to that, because this move, we need to know, is the hardest move for our aging loved ones. Not when we buy our first house, not when we retire to Florida or have those wonder years. These moves, when we need to make that move out of the home, is the hardest move for our family member, and we want to make sure we're there to empower and be empathetic through the whole process.
Alyssa, how do you understand the motivations behind this behavior, especially when there's a lot of resistance and stubbornness going on?
You know, like anything else in life, you have to read your audience and read your person. And every person I speak to, it's a different tone, it's a different behavior. Some people are like, I'm not doing it 100%. I have to take a different approach and say, okay, so it's not happening now, but down the road, these things are going to happen. We need to have a game plan. So when people are not on board, which is 9 out of 10 times, we're going to say, let's have a game plan. Let's have a game A, B, and C. If we were to fall in the next year or so, what would you want? Because I want to respect your wishes as your child, as your loved one, as your niece, as your caregiver. I want to make sure you're involved. So if your health fails, what should I do? Because you know you can't stay in the home. If you're absolutely insistent that you are not leaving, do you have the resources to pay for in-home care, which can be astronomically, as we know, very expensive? Because altogether down the road, aging is going to be a big problem we're going to face with the baby boomers in the next 10 years. So we got a whole other mountain of issues we'll be dealing with other than having this particular conversation. So it's very, very, very important, going back to all the things we previously discussed: involvement, choices, be persistent, and also visit places before you have a conversation. Nobody's loved one wants you to come in guns a-blazing saying, we need to make a transition, and have no information. Go to different communities, speak to a specialist, tell them about your loved one's personality, what your challenges might be in getting them to move. And then we get that game plan going so that there's conversations that are happening, the wheels are in motion, because every single senior is, I always say, is a broken hip away from getting into the hospital and having a life transformation that they weren't expecting. So if we have a game plan and a family goes into a conversation, we're not talking about the move immediately, but we're talking about what we're going to do when we need to make this transition. So I think that would be really helpful as well.
Alyssa, how can you facilitate change with a parent, especially where there's a lot of stubbornness?
How do you facilitate a change? Again, I'll go back to having that honest conversation. I would do a little bit of role playing. What if it were me and I were your parent and you saw that I was in a very dangerous situation? Wouldn't you want the best for me? Because I speak a lot with my aging seniors about what it was like to parent your children and be in a situation now where it feels like it's a reversal of a situation. I do it out of care and love. And there comes a point where we look at the stubborn parent and say, I know this isn't what you want. It is happening in the near future. I know this is going to upset you. What can I do to make the process better? Because my track record's pretty good. And when you have to make that transition, you have to make the transition. And we do all of our research that we can ahead of time to make that happen. But like I said before, it's not easy. And sometimes you bring in a third party person who can kind of navigate that journey with you, because oftentimes adult children, your loved ones, will be angry for having that conversation. So if you bring a professional into the situation, someone who's been in the geriatric field or someone who really knows how to talk to your loved one, that will also be a really nice tool with dealing with a stubborn parent, because getting another perspective, not someone who's related to the situation, who can be more objective, can sometimes help that situation as well.
Alyssa, what other tips can you share with our viewers on this very important but difficult topic?
You know, one of the most important things, and I kind of touched upon it, is the respect and dignity factor. And I think we don't think about this as we grow up, as we age, or even when we begin to retire. But as we age, we know that medical things happen. We have to use walkers. We have to use special undergarments. Things in our life change, our vision, our hearing. And we never think that's going to happen to us, ever. We never think that's going to happen, but it is. And we are all going to age. And I've never met a person that's aging perfectly with their cognition, their health, their emotions, everything involved. So what I say to people when you are having this conversation, always, always remember, this is a place of love. And I know people have messed up relationships with family and members. We put that aside because we are examples for our family members, whether it be our children, our nieces, our nephews, whoever is in our life. They are watching how we are treating our aging loved one. We are the example. We are the role model for how this is going to be. And if we don't have these conversations, if we aren't proactive, if we don't come at this at a place of love and that this is going to happen to everybody in their life, it's just taboo to talk about aging at this point, then we're really in big trouble. So it's going to happen to everyone. We have to have those conversations. And it's really just imperative that we bring that dignity factor and we relate that to ourselves. So when you're having that conversation with your mom, your dad, your loved one, you say, I can't imagine how this feels right now, but I know one day I'm going to be in your situation. And that is the exact reason we're having these conversations, so that I can respect your wishes and give you that dignity. And along with that dignity, comes the safety issue. They go hand in hand. And we want to make sure that you live your most independent life for whatever that is, wherever your baseline is in your aging process. And if I can have any takeaway from anything that anyone hears today is really understand that we will all be in this situation, and how we deal with it from an early start as they begin to age before it becomes a huge problem is how it's going to become a little bit easier to navigate the journey. So I think that would be my greatest takeaway through some of these several tips. And I mean, and there's more. I mean, clearly this is a big process for anyone who's dealing with someone they love and aging.
Alyssa, this is so important. I mean, I'm thinking as we're wrapping up that it's so important to be proactive rather than reactive. And
Agreed.
if you have any final thoughts, share them with us, please, and then we will sign off this.
So just first of all, I'm so humbled that you would want me to speak on the most important subject that is so passionate to me. And patience, persistence, tolerance, and empathy. Just know that those tools will help you. You're not alone. And when you need someone in that situation, reach out, because there are people that are there to help you navigate that journey. So I hope that is helpful.
Alyssa Tobias, I want to thank you so much for being our guest on Gracefully Graying. I want to thank our viewers for watching Gracefully Graying. And of course, I want to thank our sponsors for making Gracefully Graying and these important videos possible. Thank you again, Alyssa.
Thank you again for having me.